God is saying that if you don't know your worth, you don't know your purpose. You know, and God values us so much, you know, and we struggle with that. We're the ones that struggle with that internally because we feel like we're not worth it, you know. And for me, growing up as a kid in a single-parent home, Dad coming in and out of the house whenever he felt like it, I was lost in that self-worth. You know, I was lost in that identity. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know if I had value. And although I knew God at a young age, and I believed in God, and I believed in Jesus, you know, I still needed a man of God, a father, a spiritual leader to show me that, to give me that. And without that guidance, I was lost. You know, but God had a plan. Amen. Little did I know, he had a great plan for Jeremy. Amen. Back in 2005, I was arrested for 7 felonies. And it was pretty much one of those things where things were just kind of snowballing in my life. Started out with drugs, alcohol, partying, it was all fun and games, and, you know, having a blast, and, you know, started turning into an addiction, and all kind of other things started happening, and I started following my father's footsteps, which I said I would never do. You know, little did I know that's exactly what I was going to do. And got me a nice little 30-year sentence. So the newspaper, you know, they like to blast me out there, you know, and I have an article. You can Google it. Jeremy Perry, you know, 2005, over Texas. They, you know, nice bold letters. 30-year sentence. You know, they had a nice little detailed, you know, format of how bad I was and all the mistakes I had made and how the law enforcement did this interrogation and how they were watching me for all this time and how well put together this, you know, organization was that I was doing. And I mean, it was just, you know, it was like one of those. Now, don't get me wrong, if I was one of those criminals that I was into that kind of, yeah, look at me, that'd have been great. I'd have been passing those out just like she was passing out, you are worthy. I've been in prison like 30 years. Yeah. That wasn't the case. You see, I came to the realization that I was off track. I had a moment, like my brother here that was on his knees asking for forgiveness. See, I had that moment before I went to prison, before I went to jail. I was sleeping one night in our little duplex. And I probably been high for a couple of days, and I was in one of those modes where I was trying to kick it. And I was sleeping, and my wife was right here. She was sleeping next to me. We had about that time, he was about 5 months old, my new baby boy, and he was sleeping in bed with us. And I woke up, but I couldn't breathe. I was looking around, and I couldn't breathe. I was struggling. I was suffocating. Literally, I thought I was going to die. And I was trying to scream out for my wife, and the only thing I could do was, inside, was scream out to God. And in that moment, I knew, I was like, that's it. Everything, like, in that, I knew right then and there that if I didn't cry out to God, that he's going to take me up out of this place. I knew I was saved. But see, I was doing more harm than I was doing good. I was taking my family down the wrong road, just like my dad did us. I didn't know my value, and I didn't know my worth. But God lifted that off of me. And then whenever I woke up out of that, whenever I got up out of that and got that breath, I knew what I had to do. My wife went to work that morning. I never told her this. She went to work that morning. The kids went on to daycare. I hit my knees. And I said, God, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm wrong. I don't want this no more. Take this taste, take this addiction, take it away. Break the chains. Amen. 2 days later, I'm going to buy some more dope. Now, don't get me wrong. I was sincere. I was sincere about that prayer. That didn't mean that I wasn't going to struggle anymore. Let me tell you what God did. I went and got that dope. Went home and tried to get high, and that was the nastiest taste I've ever had in my mouth. And I swore, I was like, this dude here got me. I was mad. He gave me a shyster, you know, and I was mad and I was furious. And I was like, this is my homeboy, he ain't supposed to do me like that, you know. So I went back. I told him, man, what you do to this stuff, man? It tastes like, you know, like toilet water. I said, what are you talking about, man? It's straight A1. I'm like, nah, man. I said, whatever you got, man, you need to flush that, man, because you ain't going to get no customers. I'm like, you tripping. So I went to another friend. For sure this time, that was going to be okay. Went home, tried the same thing. The same taste. And immediately, after I blew that out, God told me, you told me.
Yes.
To take that taste, to take that addiction away from you. You're done. 2 days later, I'm getting locked up. So you better be careful what you pray for. And you better mean it. I'm going to be real with you. But I was grateful for that moment because I knew that's when my life was going to change. I knew that that was it. I could surrender. And coming from that adolescent, not knowing what I was doing, how I was going to do it, I couldn't be a father because I didn't know how to be. I couldn't be a husband because I didn't know how to be. When that incarceration came in, that was time for me to rejoice because I knew God was going to do something in me. I didn't know what completely. I can't tell y'all that. I just knew that he was working with Jeremy. And Jeremy was surrendering. And Jeremy had it figured out that I can't do nothing on my own. Man. I tried. And I lost every single time. And so I knew that God was going to work with me. He's going to show me how to be a man and how to be a spiritual leader. So when I get out of prison, I can be a father to my kids and a husband to my wife. Amen. And I am that today. Amen. Not only do I get that privilege, but I get to do that with other kids. Amen. I get to give back to young men and pour into their lives because I understand what they're going through. I know what it's like to go without a father. I know what it's like to be molested. I know what it's like to want to commit suicide, to be in that deep, dark depression. I know what it's like to not feel like you're worthy. But I know what it's like to be called by the one that says you are. Yeah. And because of forgiveness, that's why I'm here today. That's why we're all here. And I love being in a room full of people that understand that forgiveness. Sister here sang that song about the alabaster, box, and you don't know the cost. And, and it's real. I can hear the forgiveness in her heart. She knows what forgiveness is, And it's one of those things that that's your obligation to give it back to somebody else, And I want to bring my wife up here and Edna before I step down because these two ladies have gone through the incarceration phase with us men. And they know what it's like. See, my sister here was sitting behind the desk. My brother's on the other side. And they can testify to that same mentality. They can testify to what it was like when we were locked up, and they were out here struggling.
And his wife. That little play pretty much played out like our life a little bit. I had no idea what he was up to because I grew up in a very single-parent home, but I had a good upbringing. I didn't really, for the longest time, I didn't think I had a testimony, honestly, just because my life was pretty good growing up. Mom was kind of crazy, but it was cool because it kept me out of trouble. But I didn't really have any trouble in my life till I got with this guy. We met when we were 14, and self-worth was never anything I struggled with. I probably had a little bit too much growing up. I thought pretty highly of myself. And so we broke up because I didn't think I could just have one boyfriend at 14. But also he was doing things that just didn't quite sit right with me. And fast forward 7 years, we bumped into each other one night after I think I'd been to the club. I don't know where he was at, but bumped into each other and just kind of stuck. But I knew nothing about the drug lifestyle and any of that. It was all brand new to me. So once I started finding out what he was doing, it made me mad. I was confused, and he's pretty charming. So I just kind of wrote it out because I thought, well, surely he'll get better. It'll get better. And then when he got arrested the last time, we had 3 kids. Our youngest was 6 months old, and then we had like a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I mean, they were little bitty bitty. And I had no clue what I was going to do, but I know that I was angry. And he had been in trouble before. We'd been down that road before, and I tried to tough it out as long as I could, but I left. I was done. Asked him to divorce me. He wouldn't do it. And my mother, actually, one day she sat me down and she said, honey, you know, that man, that husband that you have, God has something so special for him. Everything he touches, you know, he's like that guy in the mythology that everything he touches, it turns to gold. And I thought, you're tripping, because at the time she was sick. So she was on a lot of medication, so I thought she was it didn't, you know, I was like, have you met him? Do you know who I'm married to? Like, you know where he's at right now? And, she said, yeah, I know where he's at. I know what he's done. He told me everything himself. And then I got mad because I was like, you're on the wrong team. You know, like, you're supposed to be on my team. You're supposed to support me wanting to get a divorce. And she just encouraged me to stick with him. And she passed away 8 years ago. And once she died, I was even more mad. At that point, I became mad at God because she had incredible faith. I watched her believe for healing. And once she died, I thought, you know, I was done with God. And I left, moved out of Lubbock, went to Fort Worth for a little bit, lived with somebody else for about a year. And then wouldn't you know that right before he got out, he kept telling me he was going to make his first parole. And again, I thought he was smoking something in prison. Because everything that I'd heard, there was no way he was going to do less than 10 years. And he had been in for about 3.5. So I ignored him. But right before when we found out that he made that parole, the guy that I was with broke up with me. And so I moved out to my own apartment. And then things just kept happening. And now looking back, I understand that God was present in every single moment of my life, whether I wanted to acknowledge it or not. He was there pulling strings and moving things around. And so I lost my job, had to call him one day, called him Friday, said, you're going to have to come pick me up. I got to move back home. And that was the last thing I wanted to do because I was still really mad at him. I still didn't want anything to do with him because he hurt me a whole lot. And, you know, there was just tons of junk built up, you know, in and around our relationship. But he came and got me, you know, my little knight in shining armor. That's what he's always been, even when he was foolish. He was pretty good at that. But drove down on a Saturday morning, packed up my whole apartment, and we moved back on Sunday and started over. And it took a while. It took a little bit for us to get back to where we needed to be. But one day, I don't even remember what I was doing, but I had a list. I'd always had this list in my head of the kind of man that I wanted. And I mean, it was pretty specific too. And I remember God telling me, you silly little girl, you have everything that you ever wanted. I just gave it to you. And you're fixing to throw it away. Because I was mean. I was so mean to him when he came home. Because all I wanted to do was get away from him. But I couldn't because I didn't have any money. But that moment, you know, just so clearly hearing God tell me that, I remember just weeping and, you know, asking him to forgive me because I knew that I'd hurt him too, you know, despite, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter what somebody does to you. You don't get to give back that hurt. It's just, you don't do that. But I from that point, we got a fresh start, and we still struggled, you know, but I've learned more about grace and mercy in the past probably 4 years than I have in my entire almost 34 years on this planet, just because I've been able to see restoration at its finest and to be able to see God restore, you know, what had been stolen over the years. And I mean, I never, ever would have imagined that this man would be the man that I would be with. But man, everything that was stolen, God restored far and above what I expected. And so I'm thankful. You know, I would never want to see anybody go through that, but for us, I'm grateful that he got to the point where he had something to catch his attention. But it's wonderful that he can now turn around and say, don't do this. This is not how you do it. And we're all broken. We're all messed up. We all struggle with things, but there's always a better alternative. And, you know, it's good to be able to share that with people.
Well, just to share a little bit about our relationship, I don't think God does things in a normal way. He does them in an unusual way. You know, just to give you a little bit of feedback about how we got together. My upbringing was very normal. I was actually in Catholic school for 9 years. I've known Jesus since I was a little kid. I was actually going to be a nun when I grew up, and that didn't work, but that's what I wanted to do. I've always just followed God, and I've always been the type of person to want to help other people. You know, that I've got that servitude heart. And I got married when I was 25. Fortunately, I got married to somebody that was an alcoholic. For about 10 years, I struggled with that, and finally just I got divorced. But I followed all the right steps as far as being a good daughter, being a good wife. And I always wondered, you know, I'm doing the right thing, and just things don't work out. I went to college. I have a degree, you know. I'm a professional. So when I got divorced, I was pretty broken. But at the same time, I had a freedom. And after I got divorced, I went on a wild rampage and just went out with one guy after another, seeking something that I couldn't find him. And a lot of that was just self-worth that you were talking about today. And I worked at a bank, and Eric's mom was one of my customers. And one day she walked into the bank and she said, you know, what's going on with you? There's just something different about you. So I told her, I said, I got divorced. I'm happy. You know, she's like, wow, that's just unusual. And I told her, I'm just happy, something that needed to happen. My life changed in a dramatic way. I honestly was happy because I felt like I'd been broken during that whole time. So she starts telling me, oh, I have a son. I have a son. She'd always talk to me, the son. So finally one day, what's the deal with your son? You keep on talking about him, never seen him. So she tells me, well, he's in Childress. I'm like, okay, he's in Childress. I was, all right. So then I see her another day, and I finally asked her, I said, when is your son going to come in? You keep on talking about him, and I've never seen him. So she, you know, calls me over, she goes, well, I got something to tell you. I was like, okay. My son he's locked up. I was like, okay. You know, he's locked up. And I was like, well, I don't judge people. My dad did prison ministry when I was in college. So I've never been the type to judge anybody. I'm a firm believer that people just make mistakes and get caught for it. So one day she walks into my office, she's like, hey, I've got something for you. I had a letter. And the letter was here, and I was like, what is this? This is for my son. I understand if you can read it. If you don't want to respond back, no problem. So I was like, okay, God, you got a funny sense of humor. I'm like, I'm looking for somebody, but I don't know if this is going to work out. So I get the letter, and I read it, and it was more of a letter of somebody that I felt was like my spiritual twin. We had so much in common, couldn't believe it. And so that same night I wrote back to him. And that was in 2007, June the 12th. And I met Eric for the first time. His mom took me on 7/7 of 2007. I'm a firm believer. So I met him for the first time, not knowing, you know, what I was going to encounter. I didn't tell my parents anything because I didn't want to be judged. So I met him, and I got a good feeling in my heart, and I prayed about it. So this went on for almost 2.5 years, coming and going, coming and going. You want to talk about keeping something secret, but not keep it secret. My neighbor never could understand, here's this woman, has her own home, has her own car, professional, has it all going together, why is there nobody there? So finally, Eric was released in 2009 after, let's see, Childress, Brownwood, El Paso, gets released, and, you know, we got together. But I firmly believe it was something that was united, and we made a covenant together with each other. So our relationship was formed in an unusual way, but it's because it was a God thing. Another thing that we encountered was, you know, when I first met him, I said, hey, if you're looking for a family, don't look at me, because I've told I can't have any kids. You know, and I can firmly understand if you want to go look another way, that's fine. I don't want to hold you back from something. It's like, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We can adopt. So I was like, that was another indication to me, this is supposed to happen. This is meant to be. So he gets home. We form our, you know, our environment together, our home. And lo and behold, there's Sebastian. Honestly, I'm not, you know, lying, but within the first month I had him. First month, first try, there you go. And it was a blessing because you can ask him about my pregnancy. This is somebody that was not supposed to have kids. No morning sickness, no sickness whatsoever. We had a lady at our church praying for us. She told me, I've been praying that you won't feel a thing. I was in labor with him for 36 hours. I didn't feel a thing. Amen. I had to have an emergency C-section, but I didn't feel a thing. And that's a God thing. So that's our walking blessing, you know, as we speak. And through this ministry and the partners that we have, we've been able to encounter a lot of things. It's not easy. When you become a Christian, things don't become easy. But knowing that God's got my back, that's all that matters to me. Amen. And it's a blessing, and I'm thankful that you guys invited us out.